there's so many Davidsons on this week between Gary now and then son Taylor's coming on to talk about a movie about it's about the Little Pink House. This is about the eminent domain case that happened in Connecticut that changed so many the way things were getting done, and so he's going to come in to talk about that as part of Herb's Film Fest.
Great.
So and then Gary's wife will be on Friday just to talk about Gary and Taylor.
Oh my gosh. You can ask any questions you like.
He needs a microphone, Ed.
She's in shock.
Good morning, Dr. Davidson.
Good morning. Please don't promote me.
Now, you got to.
I do have it. I guess I am.
Your troublemaking activities.
Oh my goodness.
Now, I want to right now apologize for dragging you into
this. What have
this.
you gotten me into? and I will. And I always have to say this at the beginning because we've all gotten the letters, right? I am only talking for myself. I actually know people on the No campaign. I know people on the Pro campaign.
Right.
I have friends over there. So when you're listening to me, I'm talking for myself. And actually, the one you were talking about yesterday, I was invited to go.
This
and
is the
speak
Hispanic
at the Hispanic Chamber. I was invited. It wasn't like, oh, please let me come and talk to you.
Right. Not like Gary sends out an email blast that says, I'm available for appearances.
Please have me come.
And what hit a lot of people, for a few people that I've talked to that are on the Government Affairs Committee for the Hispanic Chamber, one of the things, not only the fact that you were sitting there by yourself, right, and the county had the lobbyist Michael Rossi, right, Anna from Transportation, right, we had Wendell from the Yes on 463 chair,
right,
he'll be on tomorrow,
right,
and then we had Ramon Valadez,
Supervisor Valadez.
Were there any other county employees there?
Maybe,
right. Okay.
I wouldn't know.
They weren't wearing their badges. Now, that whole thing was, so people were struck by the fact that it was like, here's Gary,
right,
and there's like 5 people over here, right,
right,
and the idea that when they said, well, who do you represent? You said, I'm just here as I'm a guy.
I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars for a campaign. I made that clear, which was being said on the other side. And I think one of the things that maybe set off a flurry of memos, as you know, manila envelopes, was I started by saying that, and we'll get into that in a minute, that the road situation was really a symptom of a failure of leadership. And then I went through various items, and we'll get into that a lot. But I do want to make clear before I start talking about that, this is not personal. This isn't like, oh, these people aren't nice or they're not smart or whatever. Right. I mean, frankly, I think the issue is they've just been there way too long. And you look at any organization, whether it's, I mean, think about a military base where you had the same commander of the base for decades. I mean, the military would never do that. Or you look at nonprofits where that's happened, and they tend to ossify, you know. And here's a thing from the Wall Street Journal that was just this weekend, and it says why CEOs shouldn't hang around too long. And that's not a personal statement. That's a statement like the head of Goldman Sachs just resigned or stepped down. He didn't resign. I mean, he was fine. He decided to retire. And they said, well, why are you doing it now? And he said, because we need new eyes looking at it. And there's a comment in here. They did a study, and this is for large public companies, not for smaller ones. And they said large cap companies, this study found the optimal tenure length is 4.8 years. So when I talk about a failure of leadership, like I say, this isn't personal. It's just I hear people say there's only one way to solve this. And they've been doing it for decades, and we've reached an epic fail, and we'll get into that in a minute.
But you are right about I thought about this as you and I were talking about this article from the weekend.
Right.
About, CEOs staying too long. And I thought about it. The current office CEO of Pima County, right? If you look at other people who run counties and cities,
yes,
all right, they're never there that long.
No,
right? They're always, and so it's like, so as a guy who, I worked a lot in tourism, right? A lot of my brothers and sisters who work purely in the hotel business, part of their thing is they're getting switched out
Right.
every 4 to 5 years and going to another market.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So if you're going to marry someone in the hotel business, you say, we're not going to stay in one place for 20 years.
Exactly.
And I think it's the same in this business, except for this guy.
Well, it's like I think I've told you the story before. I was on a walking trip, and a guy there had been the city county manager. I'm not sure how they set it up in Canada, of a large Canadian city, 1 million people. And he did it for 10 years and stepped down and went back to his private engineering work. And I said, why? And he said, well, that's just long enough. And I explained, well, we've been doing it for decades. And he said, that's way too long. You need fresh eyes.
Right.
And I think, and that's why I'm saying it wasn't personal, but as I went into the issues at the Hispanic Chamber, I said, it's not just roads. There's parks where we're 85th or worse in the country.
Right.
There's poverty. And I thought I was very clear, but evidently there was some misunderstanding that our poverty rate is 20. Now the rate, not the percentage, the rate is 20 to 25% higher than it is in Maricopa or Pinal County. And actually, having read the county administrator's
response memo,
I was actually light on that. I think it's actually.
Thank you, Chuck, for confirming Gary's numbers.
I think it's actually somewhere between 25% and 33%, depending on which one of those counties you're looking at.
So real quick, because we're going to run out of time. So we're going to get into this heavy when we come.
Yep.
I'm not even going to do too much intro stuff. We're
will.
literally dumping into this. Is Ramon Valadez basically wrote a memo to Chuck based on what he thought Gary said.
Exactly.
Right. And what happened was,
not.
how far did Ramon Valadez sit from you at the table?
About 4 feet.
About 4 feet. Did he talk to you?
Only when I asked him a question.
Right. So he didn't even come up and
At
say
some
hi
point.
or anything like
No,
that.
no. But he came in after the meeting started.
Okay, so that's good.
Yeah. So I mean, he went over and said hi to somebody else.
But he could have had an opportunity to talk to you.
Oh yeah. I mean, or if he had a question, I don't know why he wouldn't have just said, "Could you clarify what you just said?" Or, I mean, I don't think that would have been lobbying. That would have just been
having a discussion.
Having a discussion, a mature, serious discussion about the issue.
You might have to understand facts in order to ask the question.
All right, we're got to go to break. Ed Alexander is going to do the quickest news he's ever done. All right, so Gary, this is at Prop 463. The chair of the Yes Folks will be on tomorrow, Gwendol Long.
Great.
Let's start with, how did we get here, Gary Davidson?
Yeah, so I'm going to go through how we got here, how it appears it will work, some viable alternatives, and then, if we have time, maybe who actually should vote for this.
Correct.
So, how do we get here? I am holding in my hand, courtesy of Joe Bogart, a very nice little chart that has been prepared by who are these guys? The U.S. Corps, the Army Corps of Engineers. Okay, so an official chart of pavement and aging and failure. And according to their chart, this is the Corps of Engineers, it takes just a bit over 13 years for a road to reach failure. Now, it is still fair, according to their chart, at 26 plus years if you do the regular maintenance.
Sure.
So at 26 plus years, you're still going along. But 13 years to failure, a little over 13 years. Now, according to, and I've quoted from that memo before, the county administrator, our region right now has $860 million worth of roads in failed or poor condition. That's a regional number.
That sounds totally accurate.
Okay, yeah, driving around. you might go, hey, that's conservative. Now, according to the same memo, in 2015, this is 2015, 3 years ago, 53% of our roads were in poor or failed condition. And these aren't my numbers again.
This is from Administrator Huckleberry.
Yeah, I realize his facts are usually, I think they're accurate. So, conclusion, different story. Okay, so now in 2018, this year, he says 70% of our roads are in poor or failed condition. Now, first, I want to ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
2015, if you subtract 13 years from that,
yes, sir,
you get that because that's the failure. To get to the 53% failed in 2015, according to the Corps of Engineers, they would have had to start it basically back 13 years before.
Right.
What year was that?
2003, Gary.
2003. Now, had the financial crisis occurred?
No, sir.
How was the economy around here doing in 2003?
Pretty much rocking.
And who was in charge?
That would have to be Administrator Huckleberry.
And who else, maybe?
Well, what's interesting is we were just talking about it yesterday with Mr. Valadez, your buddy on the at the meeting last week.
Uh-huh.
And according to his bio on the PEMA.gov, it sounded like he got in the office in 2003.
And
how's that for weird?
And who else might have been there?
Well, we know Sharon Bronson was there a long, long time.
Okay.
And then we had, of course, Richard Elias was there right around that time, maybe a little after.
So basically.
But remember, basically, just so everyone knows, Ramon Valadez was appointed to fill Dan Ekstrom's seat before that, because basically, like, that's his spiritual godfather. So it was a younger version, except maybe not as smart. And then Elias took over for Grijalva.
So what you seem to be telling me is
yes, sir,
that since you go back 13 years when these roads apparently started failing. I don't know. I'm looking at the Corps of Engineers here. We know what the fail was in 2015. Could have been a little different because maybe some weren't being maintained, et cetera. But just doing the math, subtracting 13 years from 2015 back to 2003, the exact same people are still in charge of the county.
Correct, sir.
More or less.
Right.
Either they or people who they are very much politically aligned with.
Correct.
Are still in charge.
Correct.
Okay, so now we come up to 2018, and it's 70%.
It's not like Elias and Valadez would come out in public and say, man, the guys before us, they really sucked at roads. That's not happening.
So okay, 70% now. So you take 2018 and you subtract 13 years, and what year is that?
See, now this is 2005, Gary.
2005. Now, who was the administrator then?
That would have to be Administrator Huckleberry.
So nothing's changed.
Correct.
Except the roads are worse.
Correct.
Okay. I just want, I want, you're the class historian here, so I want to make sure.
Thank you. That just gave Huckleberry a seizure. I'm the class historian.
Now, I got to tell you, and nobody seems to talk about this. This is epic failure. I mean, how can we live in a community with 70% of the roads poor or failed? I mean, it's unbelievable. There's 1% fail, and they'll go, oh, well, there's sales taxes and that. Maricopa County is 1% in poor, none failed. I pick any community, and you look at this as an essential public service, and you go 70% are poor or failed, and these aren't my numbers. This is right.
Now, 1% in Maricopa, is that an unincorporated road?
I think overall, that's
okay.
MCDOT was the number I got.
Okay.
Or maybe it's unincorporated. I mean, I
thought the last time we talked about their unincorporated roads were pretty damn good.
Oh yeah, they are. They have to be. Okay. So now let's focus on this change from 2015 to 2018. And I'm not denying it happened. So we've got an $860 million problem. And 53% of our roads were poor or failed in 2015, and now 70% in 2018. To me, that indicates in the last 3 years, we have had $200 million of roads collapse into poor or failed condition.
That's true.
That's 3 years. Now, I want you to think about what's been going on during those 3 years. I don't think Marana has contributed very much at all, and Mayor Ed could tell you, to that $200 million number. Correct. I think their roads, I think they'd probably say, no, we haven't had hardly any collapse into poor or failed. Oro Valley, my guess is the same thing.
Correct.
And truthfully, even the city of Tucson has been doing a lot of road work in the last 3 years.
They actually they got their bond passed, and they're getting things better.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that their percentage has changed.
Right.
But I don't think it's gotten worse.
Right.
So that 200, and I don't know about Sarita.
And then Sarita's doing a much better job also.
I assume that's about the same.
Right.
So $200 million has collapsed into failure in the last 3 years, that means apparently all of that must be in unincorporated Pima County.
Well, most of it has to be.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know where else it could be.
It'd be in the city of Tucson, probably some parts of the city of Tucson.
But see, you're getting worse.
Right.
This has gotten much worse.
Right.
In the last 3 years.
But you are right. So that's something we talked about the press in the first our previous discussion.
Right.
If you had a $200 million road fail.
Yeah.
Right.
In 3 years.
3 years, people should be getting fired.
Right. And Dan Shearer said when he moved into Green, his area, 10 years ago, the roads were terrible, and they're still terrible. And throughout that whole process, we've had decades of these roads being managed by the same administration.
All right, we got to go to break. I'm going to ask Gary, because what the county's sitting here, of course, I sent you the thing from the Yes on 463, of course, is we're screwed by the state.
Right. Oh.
We got to talk about that a little bit.
We've been swept again.
Right?
Actually,
so just real quick, we just got to talk about that. But we're going to keep moving through here. 790-2040 is the phone number. We are definitely going to make a YouTube of this so you can share it with all ones you love as we go into early ballots coming up. 7:17 in the morning. Gary Davidson, Christy Simone. Wake up. Oh, look at you. 7:22 in the morning. You're on the Wake Up Tucson show. Tony Ford from Startup Tucson and 10 West Festival coming up at the top of the hour. We're hanging out with Gary Davidson, and we're talking about Prop 463, how really you should be voting no on this when your early ballots come in this weekend. Gary's been explaining how we got here. Let's talk about mandated services.
Oh, yeah. Well, first,
okay.
Let me just say
yes.
that if you look at the Corps of Engineers study and where it goes for road failures, all of this started long before the financial crisis, long before the alleged state sweeps were such a big problem, et cetera. You can't get all of the 70% of our roads in poor or failed condition, even by going back to 2009. It just can't happen if you're maintaining them. You have to go back long before that and stop maintaining them. And then 13 years later, I mean, some of them may have been already down to very good, but at some point way before then, you had to stop maintaining them.
Well, we've talked about the state money when we talk about sweeps.
Right.
They're not the sweep. The word sweep is so disingenuous.
Right.
Because they make it sound like they got zeroed out.
They took all of our money, and actually, again, a quote from a memo from the county administrator, you end up, if they stop the sweeps right now, the HERF diversion, as they call it, the whole region would get an extra 11.3 million. Well, and this is in 2016. It's probably low. I don't have the current numbers.
It's higher now.
Yeah, I mean, the number
total amount of HERF.
Yeah. So, so anyhow, the diversion, he says, for the whole region would be 11.3 million. And the county would gain an extra 3.6 million a year, as compared to a county budget of 1.3 billion, which is 0.3% of the county budget, and also as compared to, like I said, we've had a $200 million failure in just the last 3 years.
So we got to reset that real quick, okay?
Yeah.
So what Chuck said in his own memo.
Yeah, this is April 21, 2016.
That if this he didn't say the word sweep in this one. Only when they're in the media did they say the word sweep.
Yeah, like it took everything.
In writing,
right.
They say the word diversion.
Exactly.
All right? If you stop the diversion, the amount of money the county would get in a year for unincorporated is $3 million.
Yeah, 3.6.
All right.
Let's be accurate.
We're a $1.3 billion budget county.
Right.
So we already figured this out. You said
0.3% of the budget.
So 1/3 of 1% of the budget he'd have to find in the budget. And this is the example I made the last time you were here.
Yeah.
We said, "Oh, Gary, I'm going to let you go. You're going to need you to take a pay cut, or we're going to fire you." Right? And you would say, "Well, how much is my pay cut?" I'm going to say 0.3, 1/3 of 1%. You're like, "Oh, okay, I'll keep my job." Right? That's what we're talking about. That's how little of a money it is that they would have to find in the budget to, quote, fill the hole by these sweeps that when they go on Bill's show and other people, sweep, 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 sweep,
Yeah,
sweep, sweep, like Mr. Cheap, sweep, 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 sweep.
And you have other people out in the community buying that same discussion. If you looked at what I'm told is the deficit for the unincorporated Pima County. Remember, 860 is for the whole county, all the region, the cities, etc. I think it's something 300 million something. So if the sweep stopped, it'd take only 100 years to cover that road deficit in unincorporated Pima County.
Now, before we got to get to the other thing that I think everyone doesn't realize, and one of the things we got to get out today with Gary is how this thing works, really works. Because we're going to do that, but I just want this is the next part after this. This is important too. So last time you were here, we talked about Chuck's opinion on mandated services.
Right, and maybe this has something to do. This is a memo.
Is this from a right-wing blog?
Yeah, this is a memo he wrote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And it says general obligation bond issue for regional road repair. That's the heading of it. This is June 14, 2018, page 5. Okay, quoting.
Subsection D.
Subsection D. The common belief that mandated services were more of a priority than non-mandated. He's talking about the historic discussions.
That sentence in itself is amazing.
That's a common belief. At the onset, I would like to state I do not agree with this philosophy, as it puts in jeopardy some of the most desirable services for typical taxpayers. And then he gives the example of the Parks Department, which, as I said, we're less than 85th in the nation. But I think right here, he's saying he disagrees kind of with the common belief that mandated services were more of a priority than non-mandated.
So he's literally saying that roads, growing grass in parks, and paying your sheriff's deputies and supporting them are not things the typical taxpayer is desiring.
I'm just reading the historical budget discussions, always focused on mandated versus non-mandated services when discussing the county's budget, with the common belief that mandated services were more of a priority than non-mandated. I share that common belief.
That's why they're mandated.
So let's do this. Let's go to break. I'm going to try to get the calls. There's so much stuff to get through here. But what Gary's going to do when we come back, this is how the bond is set up, right? On like where do roads get fixed and all this stuff.
Right.
You guys need to understand. This is the part that you really. We've already told you a lot of stuff. You got to understand the nuts and bolts of this thing. It's a weird wild ride, like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at the old Disneyland. All right, Gary Davidson, Christy Simone, Pinball Wizard. It's like driving around Thornydale Road.
Boing, 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 boing.
7:33 in the morning. You're on the Wake Up Tucson show. We're getting into the meat and potatoes, as we say, of Prop 463 and why you should vote no on this. So, Gary, now this is like a Vincent Price horror show. He's going to open the door to the House of Horrors and reveal what's within.
Or possibly within. We don't know. It's Pima County, so I'm sure it'll all work out, right? As Joe would say.
Thank you. His spirit still lives.
So, first of all, I want to touch back on, because this is very concrete. I've heard the county administrator refer to this as virtual pay-as-you-go funding, and I want to talk about that versus actual pay-as-you-go. Your cost doing virtual versus actual of interest and the issuance expense. If you take the county's most conservative numbers, you end up with about $38.2 million. That's using 1% for the issuance costs. The 2015 bonds, they were estimating 2.4%. I don't know why they're so much cheaper this time, but that's the estimate they're now using, 1%. I used 2.4% and just did the 430 million times an average of 3.4 years times 3%, also their numbers, and I came up with $54.2 million for that.
What is that 54.2?
That's just for interest and issuance. That's not fixing any roads. That goes out the door for other stuff. So and if you look at the voter guide, you'll end up with about $60 million for those two items. And that's a little higher because the state mandates they use a different number, I think, for the appreciation of the land the property values. So anyhow, even using their most conservative numbers is 38.2, going up to a high of about 60. That's what it's going to cost you. Now, how many roads could you fix for 60? Even 38.2. It's tens of millions of dollars, no matter how you look at it.
Well, that's 20 years of HERF diversions.
Well, I really didn't think of it that way, or at least 10, right? That's just for issuance costs and interest. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we've actually put this thing through, and we're looking at how's this going to operate. So if you go to page 4 and 5 of the ordinance, you'll start to get information on that. There's no list of roadways. They're not listed what they're going to fix. What they have are criteria, and it says the county will annually prioritize. The county will annually prioritize roads for reconstruction. How are you feeling, Chris?
Will annually prioritize. I got to write that down. It's so good.
Reconstruction, repair, and preservation using an automated model developed by the Transportation Department. And if you saw my cousin Vinny when the FBI guys testifying, he says, we did this with an HP 4220 with turbo drive. That reminds me of that. And now it says group road segments requiring similar treatments by township. So they're going to put these together, and I think the idea, but remember, to minimize segmented repairs to reduce public inconvenience and construction costs. That sounds really good, but it also means if you start in an area that the county prioritized, you could keep building in that area for quite a while based on this, well, we don't want to segment. So if you're thinking, well, my area is going to get some repairs, I'm just saying hold on to your wallet a little bit here.
So when I hear the phrase, the county will annually prioritize the roads, right? I take that as seriously as someone saying, Wilt Chamberlain practice abstinence. You know, that's as serious because they were supposed to be annually prioritizing roads, Gary, from 2003.
Right, right. And then it goes on. They're going to use PASER ratings, which is a federal thing. They said repair or reconstruct roads with the worst PASER ratings first, using the proceeds available annually. Now listen, remember what I said before. 70% of the roads in this region are in poor or failed condition. So we are talking about an extremely target-rich environment. I'm sorry, it says the county.
A little flip.
They could choose roads almost anywhere because 70% of them are failed or poor, so we're using these with the worst PASER ratings first. Well, all of them have terrible
So
PASER.
You and I are District 1 residents.
And we certainly are.
We pay in the most, and we have the worst percentage of roads of any district ever.
Right.
Okay? Well, again, we have roads that have not been touched since the Mets won the World Series in '86. Okay? So according to the way this is written, okay, if you're a District 1 resident who's really upset about your roads, and you're doing the SALC thing, right? That's the only way to fix my roads.
Right.
Chuck and the three Dems can still screw you and make all of this, basically most of this, go to the other districts that they run.
On these criteria, absolutely, because 70%. And here's the other part of it. This bond is only going to fix, according to them, 50% of the roads that are in poor or failed condition. That means 65% of the roads, including half of those in poor or failed condition, aren't going to get touched at all because they're only doing half of them with this bond issue. And this bond issue, I don't know, will it last 9 years? I don't really know. Now, you've got some experience, I know, because you happen to be on the road advisory committee.
I got the tire marks on my back to show it, Gary.
Now, how do you feel about hearing this is the criteria for picking them?
So I'm on this Transportation Advisory Committee, which is invoked in this thing. There's somewhere.
We'll get to that. Yep.
All right. And so what happened was they raised the tax, right? They raised your taxes to fix local roads. This is the tax that they had to get rid of because they can shove this thing down your throat. So that's why the yes on 463, you're going to hear it from Wendell tomorrow. They gave you the biggest tax cut in history or whatever, right? Well, because they gave it to you 2 years ago.
Right.
All right. So then it was sold that this was going to basically go to the Transportation Advisory Committee, and they were going to be able to pick the roads in each district that would get fixed. We actually had a unanimous vote of the committee. All right? That's with us even being outnumbered by the Dems, and Chuck has 3 appointees on it. So the way this went down is when it got to the nitty-gritty, all right, of all those unanimous votes that said, oh, so Reggie Drought, my fellow appointee at the time, Barney's my fellow appointee now, okay, we basically had 4 town meetings. Great attendance at these things.
Right.
Okay, because they're pissed off about their roads. Okay. So we try to prioritize on the ones that were hurting the most. And what happened was Chuck just wanted to use the money to spray seal and keep roads better. We're like, man, we got people suffering. Let's have a few wins on the board. That was our take on how we picked roads.
Right.
Okay. And what happened was it went 7-6 that they rejected ours, accepted Steve Christie's in the Steve got it rejected too at the county level, at the committee level.
Well, we'll get back to that.
All right. And what happened was Amber Smith from the chamber, Rick Price, Ekstrom, and all those guys screwed us over. And I want to give credit to 2 of Chuck's appointees, which is Kurt Lewick and Tom, the guy from Somas, I can't believe I'm spacing his name, McGovern, who owns Somas Civil Engineering. They actually voted with us, and we lost 7-6.
Right.
Instead of 9-4, which I thought it was going to go.
So you're feeling much better about this as I read it.
Absolutely not. But keep going.
Well, and I also could point out the great passover of the 2015 bonds, where all of a sudden at the last minute, all of the stuff basically in the central city and going way almost to Oro Valley, all of the projects got removed.
Right.
In kind of the back room. But hey, I'm not saying this won't work just really well. So then we go to 4.26 of the ordinance, and this is the annual list of roads. And it says on an annual basis, Transportation Finance Department will determine the total amount of bonds, okay? And then the Transportation Department will then use the above selection criteria that we just went over to develop a recommended annual list of roads to be treated with these revenues. The recommended list will then be reviewed by the Transportation Advisory Committee, where Chris has just explained what goes on there, adjusted if necessary, and recommended and transmitted to the Board of Supervisors for approval. So the board can change it again if they choose to.
Right. Now the other thing, well, what could happen, because Steve Christie's on board with this, right? He's telling everyone to vote for this bond, even though he shouldn't be, Steve, is the idea that they could do the same thing. We could go through the whole rigmarole of the process at the committee, right? Then it gets, even if it could get approved at the committee, right? Then it gets to the Board of Supes, and they screw District 1 again on the roads, take care of Steve because he came out for the bonds. And you got to remember, they've been screwing District 1 way before Allie Miller. Okay? They were some of the worst roads when Ann Day was there playing ball with these guys for years.
Right.
All right? Remember, District 1 and District 4, you guys are the sheep. They shear you to pay for other things. Remember that. All right, keep going. Give me more of what's give me the nitty-gritty of this bond.
So then going down, paragraph 4.3, bond proceeds are limited to construction costs directly related to pavement reconstruction. That makes total sense. Now, this is something I want all the towns to pay attention to. I can't tell you what exactly this means, but it talks about a bond plan being developed, and it says identify which roads to repair, and this is the municipalities, with the municipality's total share of bond proceeds over a maximum of 9 years. And we'll come back to that. I want you guys out there in the municipalities to have somebody read this and decide what you think it means. And then 2, annual list of roads to be developed by the municipality and reviewed and recommended by the Transportation Advisory Committee. And then in 3, qualifying reconstruction, repair and preservation treatment types include mill and overlay, structural overlay, and reconstruction. In other words, municipalities, this doesn't cover just ordinary maintenance. This is like total rebuild.
So what you're saying is, the way you're reading it, is that if you're a municipality who takes care of roads, the bond basically says that it's only for reconstruction, mill and pave type of jobs, and if you don't have enough of those,
what happens?
Right.
I don't know. And it takes 13 years for them to fail, And there's this 9-year thing in here, which I don't know if that's a maximum 9. I don't know. They ought to read it.
So before we go to break, so here's some municipality people that are coming out against this. Bill Bracco in Sarita is coming out against this. Mayor Ed is not just a no, but a hell no again on this. Steve Kozachik, Democrat from Tucson, is telling you no on this. Right?
Well, I know Steve reads these things.
Correct.
By the way.
And then, of course, Supervisor Allie Miller has been way strong no against this. So there is a variety of electeds out there, all right, including a Democrat in the center who's probably one of the few people over there that can read a budget and read these things. And Steve's telling you this is a no. So 7:45 in the morning. This will be made in a YouTube before lunch. You need to share this with all your friends and family. Gary Davidson, Christy Simone, Ed Alexander, Tony Ford from 10 West and Startup Tucson coming up at the top of the hour. Wake up, Tucson. See, that's the mechanics of the universe there, right? He hit number 1 today on this with this song so many years ago, and here we are talking. It has so many meanings.
Same damn roads in 64 in this town.
Wait, that's when we start letting them fail.
But they've been chip sealed, so there's little cracks have black stuff in them. It's really cool.
Ray Charles broke his car's axle on Thornydale Road 40 years ago visiting his aunt, and that's still there. So that's nostalgia. 790-2040 is the phone number. Let's go to Carlos Ruiz. He's the chair of that Government Affairs Committee at the Hispanic Chamber. Carlos, what's up, buddy?
Hi. Hey, Chris. Hey, Gary.
Hi, Carlos.
I just wanted, I wanted to corroborate.
There you go.
There is corroboration. Our committee is it's all small business owners like myself. And we're very low key, and I just felt that it was important. We come out on various issues, and I thought it was important for the Tucson Hispanic Chamber to hear both sides. And I heard Gary a few weeks back, and I thought, hey, let me invite him in, but also bring in pro. And so I felt bad because it transpired very quickly, and Gary came in. And then all of a sudden, the 5, and so the poor guy. I mean, I felt he was at the head, surrounded by 5 pro people, but he does lay out a very and there's no secret now. This committee voted after discussion, after hearing both sides. This committee voted to say no on Prop 463. Now the board, the Hispanic board, still needs to vote on it, and that's coming up soon. So I'm glad you're having Mr. Long on tomorrow, so that hopefully some of them are hearing Gary. Hopefully some of them will hear Wendell, and then they'll be able to take not only our recommendations after hearing after we heard it and voted, but we said we recommend a no vote because I think Gary lays out a very convincing argument that there should be another way, and we just haven't gotten to the point to where everyone will agree on what this other way is. But I think we did consider, and we just think that this committee said no, we should seek another way.
Carlos, thanks for the call, man, and
thanks, Carlos.
Thanks for doing what you're doing. Keep us updated.
Good thing. Okay, bye-bye.
That's Carlos Ruiz, owner from HT Metals, former chair of the Hispanic Chamber, and now one of the co-chairs of their Government Affairs Committee. He actually said after Gary and the 5 pro-yes people were there, including Valadez, Wendell Long, and the paid county lobbyists on your tax dollars, that his committee has recommended that the Hispanic Chamber come out against 463.
The county meter was spinning.
Yes, you are correct. We got about 6 minutes, buddy.
So I'm going to try to move quickly then. If you look at the ordinance, table 3, paragraph 5.5, you'll see this is uncertain, but it appears to me they're going to start the sales of these bonds if it passes next year, and they'll go on for 9 years, it looks to me. We'll talk about that again in just a second when I talk about alternative funding. But don't expect it's like, oh, if this passes, all the roads get fixed next year. It's nothing like that, nor could it be. I think one interesting part of this that you might want to take note of is on page 2, where the county promises to maintain these repairs if it makes them. So if you pass this bond issue, for some reason we're going to start doing road maintenance. And I've already talked about how I think the municipalities really ought to pay attention to that page 5, paragraph 4.31. With the issue, because they may not really have.
I want to add one quick thing.
Yes.
One of my reasons that I'm against the city parks bond, okay, is they have no capacity in their budget to take care of new things that they're going to build. I would argue that the bad priorities of Chuck and the Three also play into this, right? If you're going to mill and pave. What is the track record here to say they're not going to let them go to hell in 13 years?
Why, if for at least 13 years I haven't been doing adequate maintenance, do I actually believe that this on page 2 where they say now we're going to start doing it? Well, give us a lot more money and then we'll actually do what we should have been doing for decades. I mean, we're talking decades.
That's a great moment. We're going to start fixing roads right
after you
now.
Yeah.
Right after.
And going back to that, this has to have been going on for decades. I mean, this is the Corps of Engineers is saying this is how long it takes to get to Porterfield.
Let's get
we're
to
70%.
Let's get to alternatives.
Alternatives. First, the county could. It's tough. It's even tough to say. By operating more efficiently. And I really won't go too deeply into the numbers, but my numbers, when I've compared Maricopa and particularly Pinal County, which is smaller than us, we may have and I've added back in, I've done the numbers before. If we were operating as efficiently as Pinal County, we would have 4,735 employees. And this is off of last year's budget numbers, which showed we had 7,056 employees in Pima County. Now you say, well, they don't do wastewater. Fine. That's 467 employees. Add them all. We have an urban park system in the county. Okay, that's 284 employees. These are budget numbers. Add all of them. We have a urban library system we're running that they don't have. Well, they have some. So add the 384 net employees. That comes up to 5,870 employees if we were run as efficiently as Pinal County. And mind you, I added all of the wastewater employees, and I don't know if some of them, if that's all being operated efficiently. But still, it's well over 1,000 employees.
So you said 5,400 adding all those people back in, right?
5870.
5870, and we're at 7,001.
Well, now, but we're over 7,100 now. Last year, which was what I was basing my numbers on, the budget showed we had 7,056 employees, which means that's an extra 1,186 employees. If with benefits they were getting 60,000 each, which I think is extremely conservative.
Right.
That would be a $71 million a year savings.
Is that including bennies?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's 60,000.
Right.
Now, wait a minute. We'll wait. There's more.
2 minutes to say.
Okay. If they were higher paid, let's say 90 on average, and you were cutting actually managers and not librarians and park staff, you could end up at 120 with bennies. Then you might only be reducing staff by 500 people, less than 10% of the staff, still generating more money than the bond program would with none of the issuance costs, no interest. The other thing they could do that I think would be worth exploring is look at taking the increase. This is just the increase that they are projecting in the property tax values plus state shared sales tax revenues plus shared VLT. just those 3 items. This year, that's to be $490.5 million.
Right.
If you just took the increase, which they're projecting in this bond program on the property values, that averages about 4.3% a year. It goes up and down a little, which means the increase next year would be $21 million, just the increase. And then the following year be $43 million, and by the point is, by 23-24, just the increase would be $100 and almost $16 million. If you took half of that, you've got more than the bond program with no interest costs, no issuance costs, etc. Now, is that far-fetched? Businesses do this stuff all the time. You personally, I mean, you hear all the personal finance people saying, well, if you get a raise, then take half of it and put it towards retirement or the college fund, paying off your mortgage. This is real common stuff.
Right, correct. Gary, thanks for your service today. We ran out of time.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you. Sorry we dragged you into all this. This will be made into a YouTube in the next 5 hours. You need to share it. I'm going to put it out there. You guys need to share it with all of your voter friends out there. Anyone you know that's on the board of the Hispanic Chamber should listen to this also.